Fantastic. All right. Ko Paula Iskett Tokuingoa. I'm LIANZA's Professional Development and Events Lead. We've got a fantastic session for you today with a taster of 2 more to come. So I'm actually going to hand over to Siobhan to introduce our keynote speaker, and have a great time, everybody.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Paula. Before I hand over to Tamsin, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to give you a little context about her connection to the University of Otago Library, and also why I think this series of sessions sits so naturally within our professional development as library and information professionals. So Dr. Tamsin Braisher is an Assistant Research Fellow in Anatomy at the University of Otago, and our Wikimedian in residence. The residency is hosted by the University Library, and Otago was the first tertiary institution in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to establish a role of this kind. Over the past year, the library has had the opportunity to work with Tamsin across a really diverse range of mahi. That has included information and digital literacy, improving public information about our libraries and the university, exploring connections between Wikidata and our discovery systems, supporting the visibility of research and collections, and finding creative ways to engage staff, students, and our wider communities with open knowledge. The breadth of that work has been one of the things I have found particularly interesting. Wikimedia isn't something sitting off to the side of librarianship. For me, it intersects with a great deal of what we already do. So Tamsin also leads the New Zealand Thesis Project, which has helped make research from New Zealand universities more discoverable, with New Zealand theses now cited in more than 2,000 Wikipedia articles across 34 languages. And I guess that brings me to Te Tautara and our own continuing professional development. At the heart of our professional ethics is our primary duty to help with the collection, preservation, and availability of knowledge and ideas, and to facilitate their flow. Wikimedia gives us another very practical environment in which we can exercise that responsibility. There are connections across Te Tautara, kotahitanga, or strength and unity and teamwork, the Pacific values, the framework associates with collaboration and partnerships and capabilities through literacies, reference and research services, information, knowledge and data management, teamwork and collaboration, and community care and services. So as you take part today, and hopefully in the one ref sessions that follow, I would encourage you to think of this not simply as another learning about another digital tool, but as an opportunity to apply the strengths we already bring as library and information professionals in a different environment, and to contribute those strengths to making knowledge more open, discoverable, and useful. And importantly, don't forget to include these sessions in your LIANZA CPD logbook. The CPD pathway is aligned to Te Tautara, and this is a great opportunity not only to build your capability, but to also reflect on where this learning connects with your own professional practice. So it is a real pleasure to have Tamsin here to help us do exactly that. For my part, I will be monitoring the chat as we go, so please feel free to add your questions there. I'll keep an eye on them and help bring them together for Tamsin to address at the end of the session. Otherwise, Tamsin, it's over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Let me share my screen, and this is the first test always. Can I present the right part of my screen? Let's see. So, are you seeing my slides in the correct view? Excellent. Thumbs up from Siobhan. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Siobhan. My name is Tamsin Braisher. I'm the Wikimedian resident, as Siobhan has said, and I'm really excited to talk to you about Wikipedia today. So I'm going to cover a little bit about who I am and what I do, but I'm not going to dwell on that because you've already had an introduction and there's other places to find that out. I'm going to talk a bit about why engaging with Wikipedia is important for libraries and librarians. I'm going to give you a primer on Wikipedia and how it works, lifting the curtain a bit. You will be some of the best informed librarians in the country when we finish that bit. And then we'll finish talking about libraries specifically on Wikimedia and some of the things that we can do to help connect the two things together. So this is me. That top photo is me at Wikimania in Paris in July. I was lucky enough to go and promote a book that I've written with another Wikimedian about wikifying conferences as a way of reaching out to researchers and experts. This went down really well with the Wikipedia and Wikimedia communities. They're very eager to do this kind of work. So this was a really fun trip for me. But I've been editing Wikipedia and its associated projects since about 2018, and most of that time as a volunteer. But since May last year, I've been in the library here at Otago, and that bottom photo is my little wiki corner out in the library under the stairs, a bit Harry Potterish. And yeah, I'm helping mostly students and staff understand how Wikipedia works and how they can contribute to it. I'm funded by Wikimedia Aotearoa New Zealand, which means anyone who's ever clicked the donate button, thank you very much. This is the kind of activity that you're supporting when you do that. But why be a Wikimedian in residence in the first place? Well, as soon as you start publicly engaging as a Wikipedian, you realise most people have never met anyone who confesses to being a Wikipedia editor. So whilst there are quite a few people who've edited out there, not many people talk about it, which means that we've never really moved beyond some of these myths that exist about Wikipedia, the most pernicious of which I think is that because anyone can edit it, I can't trust it. And I would love for people to reach a more nuanced understanding of whether or when they can trust Wikipedia content. And I was horrified to learn at Wikimania, I was talking to someone who is a Wikimedian in residence at one of our most prestigious universities in the world, and they are having students turn up at the university who haven't heard of Wikipedia. They don't know what it is at all. That was quite horrifying to me to realise that we've reached the stage where it's possible for that to happen now. So what do? I'm not going to go through all the detail of this. You've heard a bit from Siobhan already, and I wrote a whole Library Life article about all the things I've been up to in the library and in the university as a whole, but also because I'm a public Wikipedian outside the university too. I've talked to science teachers and public librarians, and all sorts of community groups have contacted me because I'm publicly a Wikipedia editor. So that's fun. You get all sorts of interesting queries from the public. And the thesis project, that's my little darling baby project. I love this. And we're currently doing an update to this at the moment, which is a really interesting process to go through. But one of the things when I first started out on the floor of the library with access to students was to ask them lots of questions. So I was putting up surveys on the whiteboard and on the touch screen, asking them things like, what did their teachers tell them about Wikipedia? How do they use Wikipedia versus how do they use AI? And then this one, where do you start looking for a source for your information? And I asked this particular one in various different ways. You know, if you've got an essay topic you need to investigate, where do you start, and so on. I got wildly different numbers every time I asked the question, which I think was basically telling me that the touchscreens are open to abuse. You can answer lots of times. So the numbers are not helpful, but it's a useful question to ask. And it's probably one that most libraries ask at some point. Where are our users starting when they're looking for information? And so one of the most common ways to start, I think this will still be true, is with some kind of internet search engine. So I'm just using Google here to search for Janet Frame. And this was the result that you get just a couple of days ago looking for Janet Frame. And these are all the bits that are coming from Wikipedia. So the very first website mentioned in the search is in the pictures, and that's Facebook. Thank you, Google. But the next site down is Wikipedia. And basically, for anything you search on Google or other sites, if there is a Wikipedia page matching that subject, it's going to be in the top 2 or 3 hits, generally speaking. If the Wikipedia page is the top hit, you'll get a paragraph or the lead section of the article extracted here for you. So you may not need to visit Wikipedia to answer whatever question you had. But in this particular search result, there's also an open library panel. And if you click through to the Open Library, you'll discover that that's also coming from Wikipedia and Wikidata. There are other things in this result, birth, death dates, parents and stuff. You can't tell where that's come from. Thank you, Google. It's a mystery. I'd be surprised if it hasn't come from Wikidata or Wikipedia to some degree, but you can't tell. Another place, one that we hope people start looking for information, is within the library catalogue itself. And if your library uses Ex Libris's Primo system, like ours, then you may have turned on this particular feature. It's an optional one, but it provides you with information cards that give context around the item in the collection. So it gives you information about authors, but also about illustrators, directors, if it's a media item, subjects, and so on. And you get these cards down the right-hand side. And those cards are working from Wikidata via the Library of Congress identifier on the work and the author. And sometimes if you click through to that card, you'll also get information from Wikipedia. So lots of academic libraries use Ex Libris Primo, so you'll see it mostly there. But this particular screenshot's from the National Library of Scotland. So it's really reinforcing to me when I edit Wikidata and I make these descriptions. This one says New Zealand author and gives Janet's dates. That information is travelling all around the world and being seen directly in library catalogues. Let's try that next slide. There we go. And so another increasingly common place to start looking for information now is probably in AI. And you're going to get different looking results depending on which one you use. I've just turned on AI mode in Google for this screenshot. But we all know that there's a variety of different models you can use. In AI mode of Google, it's showing you where it's got its information, and we can see it's drawing a lot from Wikipedia in the links that it's giving there. Different models will give you different amounts of sourcing. It may not tell you at all where it's pulled the information from, but the one thing we do know is that because of the open licensing of information from Wikipedia, and because of the size of the data set that you get from Wikipedia, and because it's written by humans, it is the base training data for most AI models. I don't want to say all, because there's bound to be one out there that someone's tried to train without it, but pretty much all the big ones will include Wikipedia. So people will be getting Wikipedia content regurgitated or refashioned and combined with other things, even when they're not aware of it. So what I'm really trying to get across here is that Wikipedia is basic information infrastructure for the web. It's being accessed through Google and search engines and voice assistants and AI tools. You'll even see it on the back of your airplane seat if you look up the destination information. And it's being used by everybody, researchers, journalists, students, the general public. And in parts of the world, because of access to other sources, you'll even find medical professionals using Wikipedia. Which is a slightly scary thought. So Wikipedia is everywhere, but it's also a really useful access point for people to get information in your collections, in your libraries. So every Wikipedia article, the links within the article are going to other Wikipedia pages. We all know about that rabbit hole effect, right? Click on the link, go to the next article, and 3 hours later you haven't remembered to cook dinner. But in the reference section and the external link section of every article, you will find links out of Wikipedia. And I thought I'd look at Janet Frame's links to see where you can go from her article. You can go to various New Zealand websites, Medical Journal and the Lancet, stuff in Otago Daily Times, also Victoria University of Wellington and University of Auckland. But there are also other places that links hide in Wikipedia articles, like behind images. So this image of Janet has come from Massey University, and if you click the image, you'll get a link. This image of Seacliff is 2 clicks away from its source because it's supposedly coming from the Dictionary of New Zealand Biography, but when you click through to there, you find it's really been supplied by the Alexander Turnbull Library. And surprisingly to me, and this is something I might need to fix, although Janet Frame's archives are at the Hocken Collections, there's no link to the Hocken from her page. But if you click through to the UNESCO Memory of the World, Aotearoa New Zealand site, there you will find that all the information is coming from the Hocken Collections. So you can find your way back to more information if you want to read about Janet Frame. All right, I said I would give you a primer on Wikipedia, and this is where it begins. So Wikipedia is the 8th most popular website in the world, and actually whether it's like the 5th or the 7th or the 9th, it depends who you're asking and how they're measuring, but it's the only non-profit in the top 10. It gets ridiculous numbers of visitors a day. 70 million is the latest figure. And there's more than 7 million articles in English. We add about 400,000 articles in English a year. Now, there are actually 348 languages that Wikipedia is available in. It's really easy to forget that when you're an English speaker and you're looking at English Wikipedia. But yeah, there's 68 billion articles in total. It's vast. And it attracts about 10 million edits a month by 250,000 regular editors. But in New Zealand, we're more like 250 regular editors, and very regular, like multiple edits a month, is probably down in the double digits. And we're responsible for about 50,000-ish New Zealand articles. So the real basics about Wikipedia, what I think probably most people either know or can infer from what they know is what's here. So it's built on this paradigm of continuous improvement. So we don't expect an article to be perfect before we publish it. In fact, they very rarely are. We generally imagine that just about every Wikipedia article can be improved in some way, and that's okay. We require reliable sources, so anything that's on Wikipedia should have been published about somewhere. And verifiability is the cornerstone of all of this. Can readers check that the information is correct? So these are real basics that I expect you already know, but I want to dig into it in a bit more detail to explore it a bit further. So we often talk about the purpose of the encyclopedia. It describes itself as wanting to be the sum of all knowledge, but I think that's slightly misleading to people because it tends to give you the impression that Wikipedia wants to have everything, that it wants to be comprehensive, and everything belongs on Wikipedia, and that's not really the case. So the way I like to talk about it is the purpose of a Wikipedia page. And the purpose of the page is to be a summary of the available information on the topic from reliable, verifiable, independent sources. So we're not trying to be a soapbox, an advertising platform, or a directory. And what you can probably figure out from this, if we're not trying to be a directory, if we're not trying to be comprehensive, then we have some criteria for inclusion, right? We'll have what we call notability criteria. Not everything belongs, so there must be some way of figuring out what does. And one of the ways, the major way we figure out what does, is reliable sources. So every article on Wikipedia should have reliable sources. They should be verifiable and independent of the subject. And Wikipedia editors recognize that this is particularly important for controversial topics and for living people because of the potential for harm in those areas. Now, of course, what follows from this is if there are no verifiable, reliable, independent sources, there shouldn't be a Wikipedia article on a topic, right? So this is the starting point for all Wikipedia articles. Okay, so another really important feature of Wikipedia is neutral point of view. So all articles should have an impartial tone that documents and explains major points of view, giving due weight to their prominence. So we'll often sort of represent disagreements, you know, historians A and B think this, historians C and D think that. And what the Wikipedia editor's hoping is historians E and F will come along and settle the argument once and for all, and we could represent that instead. But what neutral point of view doesn't mean is that we never take a position on anything. So the page on the flat earth will say this is an archaic and disproven theory. The page on climate change does say it's driven by human activities. But I can guarantee, even without looking at the discussion pages for these, that would have been a topic of discussion amongst editors. Do we represent this as a disagreement among sources? Because there will be sources that say the earth is flat, or do we present this in Wiki Voice? So these things are settled by the community. All right, so the other thing about sources is what it means that no original research, so no unsourced opinions or value statements are allowed. There shouldn't be advocacy, anecdotes, opinions. And what that also means is we very rarely use primary sources. Because if you're using a lot of primary sources to build an article, then your temptation is to synthesize and interpret, which is not work that belongs on Wikipedia. So we prefer secondary and tertiary sources. Now, all of these editorial policies that I'm describing were developed by the community. So you may have heard of the Wikimedia Foundation. That's the organization that handles the donations. They employ the staff that write the software and the tools. They keep the servers running and the lights on. What they don't do is set policy or write content. That is all up to the community. And what that means, of course, is if you have a community developing the policies, they can change over time. It also means that communities that operate independently, like our different language Wikipedias do, can have different policies. So you may find if you edit an Indonesian Wikipedia, it'll have very different policies and templates and ways of doing things than the English one does. Now, who can edit is, I think, one of the reasons why there's some distrust of Wikipedia content, because of this anyone can edit thing. And I'm not sure that's really fair. So Wikipedia, anyone can edit, and we know this, but the upside of that is you don't have to be an expert. So if you have skills to find sources, read, interpret, and summarize them, then you can write on a topic even if you don't know that much about it. You're also allowed to make mistakes because you're not expected to be an expert. We do have rules around behaviour. You are expected to be civil, and we have this policy called assuming good faith. And that means that if you enter into a disagreement with someone, you're expected to assume that they're trying to improve the encyclopedia just like you are, and that encourages you to engage with them on the difference of opinion about the facts or the policies rather than attacking behaviour or the person. So being civil is really important on Wikipedia. We also have a conflict of interest policy. So just because anyone can edit doesn't mean anyone can edit anything. You shouldn't write articles or edit articles about your friends, your family members, your colleagues, or your employer. So it's also worth remembering editors are volunteers. You can't tell anyone what to work on Wikipedia. So everybody gets to work on what they want to work on. It's okay to be anonymous on Wikipedia, so you don't even have to make an account to edit. You can just edit from your IP address, which these days will get you a temporary account, which will store edits from the same address for a few months, I think. But if you edit like that, there are certain types of content, controversial things that you can't edit, and your edits will be more scrutinized for vandalism. But even if you create an account, you are allowed to be completely anonymous. You don't have to say where in the world you are, who you are, what your history is. And that's okay. And one of the reasons it's okay is transparency. So every single Wikipedia page has a history. So you can track every change that's ever been made to that article. You can see what the article looked like at every point in its editing history. You can see who made changes, what they made, and you can also see what other changes that person has made. So this transparency feels quite radical compared to other parts of the internet. And it can be a bit daunting when you're a new editor to realize that every single thing you do is tracked and recorded in a list. But actually, it's also quite freeing because it's the same for everyone. It's how you build up credibility on Wikipedia, how people can see that, yes, you are here to improve the encyclopedia, not to damage things. And it also means you don't have to worry about making mistakes. If you accidentally mess up the formatting on a table or delete a section when you're trying to add a citation, it's not a problem. We can fix it. You can't break Wikipedia, and we can always go back to a past version of something. And I really like that aspect of it. Now, over time, Wikipedia editors have developed a number of ways of trying to signal to their readers where you can trust information a bit more and where maybe you don't want to trust it so much. So we use warning templates and banners like citation needed, which probably most of us have heard of. We've got these multiple issues things for where an article has maybe several problems going on. So this is us trying to tell readers, pay a bit more attention here. Perhaps this isn't our best content. For vandalism, most of that gets reverted very quickly. So common things like swear words and rude stuff gets reverted by bots within a few seconds. But we also have a team of people that will patrol Wikipedia looking for vandalism and reversing it. Because we do this thing called assuming good faith, anyone that does vandalism will generally get a warning, and we'll try to engage and describe why what they're doing isn't helpful. But if an account repeatedly vandalizes or damages articles, they'll be blocked from editing. Wikipedia editors have also found ways of signaling when we think articles are good and that things we're proud of. So if you see these little gold stars or green crosses on the front of an article, they'll be over on the right-hand corner, I think. I'm generally quite small. But those are indicating featured articles and good articles. And those are articles that have been through peer review. I imagine most people don't know we have a peer review system on Wikipedia. So our quality rating system is this little rainbow strip over on the side, and it starts with stub articles at the bottom, which are very short ones, up to around sort of 220-ish words, and you progress up the scale as the articles get better and more complete, until good article is where you go through a peer review process with another editor against a set of criteria, and basically it should be a pretty good article with nothing major missing and everything is sourced and checked. But featured articles up the top here in the purple, these are our very best content, and that's to be considered as good as an article can be. So you'll see these badges for featured and good articles on the article page itself, but the quality ratings for other articles are on the talk page. So every Wikipedia article has a talk page where we have our discussions about it and where we record these quality assessments. There's also importance assessments, but I think they're less useful to readers, more useful to editors. Okay, so I've tried to persuade you that both Wikipedia is everywhere and really important, and then take you through this primer. You hopefully are now feeling quite informed about how Wikipedia works compared to most people. But you'll have seen the emphasis that there is on reliable sources in Wikipedia. And so it's a good time to reflect on what happens when knowledge is missing. So obviously when there are no sources, there shouldn't be a Wikipedia article on something, but that flows on. It means there's no mention in all the other places that rely on Wikipedia, like AI, or it's using very unreliable sources if it is giving you information on a topic. So Wikipedia mirrors inequality. I wonder sometimes if it amplifies inequality in the sources. And I tend to use women as an example of this because the gap's fairly obvious, right? 50% of the population, but the biographies on Wikipedia are only 20% about women. And these gaps flow through not just from biographies, that's the obvious one that we can measure and, everyone can see, but it's also women's health, women's organisations, women's interests are also underrepresented on Wikipedia. And the reasons for this, of course, are probably reasonably well understood. Women are less well represented in leadership roles, in prizes, in recognition, in all the sorts of things that Wikipedia would say would make you notable, in professional sports, for instance. Even when women are in those positions, they tend to get a bit less coverage in reliable sources. And then, of course, there's the bias in the Wikipedia editing community. Wikipedia editors have historically been American, white, college-educated men. So they have their own interests, and that's why you will find that sport is incredibly well covered on Wikipedia. So I use women as an example, but I ask you to consider if women's biographies are only 20% of the biographies, then what is the representation like for other communities like minorities in gender, ethnicity, language, and so on? They're harder to measure. We don't know what representation looks like for some of those groups on Wikipedia, but we can be pretty sure that they'll be underrepresented. And some of it will be about sources and some of it will be about those other biases. And of course, editors being volunteers, we can't tell people to fill these gaps. We just have to hope people will. Now, I wanted to put an Aotearoa perspective in here, but so I wrote my list. It started becoming a list of all the things you can have on Wikipedia. So basically, because I've been editing Wikipedia for 8 years, when I first started, I couldn't see gaps and I didn't know what to write about. And now all I see is gaps. Every time I look at Wikipedia, it's like, no, we're missing this, we're missing that, we're missing the other. And I've put Maori scholarship and Indigenous knowledge up the top because we know this is a well-acknowledged gap on Wikipedia here. But I also want to say that we recognise that not all Indigenous knowledge belongs on Wikipedia. When you openly license your writing, when you openly license your images, you lose control of it. And you're saying that anyone can use it for any purpose, and that isn't always appropriate. So acknowledging that there are still gaps, even amongst things that people would want to share and would want well represented on Wikipedia. We're also missing Maori perspectives and things. So we were talking this week in the community about an article. It was written 15 years ago when most of the sources referred to this kaitahu person with their English first name. And so that's what the Wikipedia article uses. But if you were to write that article now, far more of the sources would use their Maori name. And so you would write the article differently. And so there's a gap between what the Wikipedia article is saying and what the current sources say, and it's just we haven't managed to catch up to the sources. So there's probably always a kind of a lag there. And there'll be lots of Wikipedia articles written using quite old sources, and they just haven't caught up with the current ways of thinking and talking about things. So that's not an obvious gap, but it's a problem, and it's something we would love. We would love to improve, I think. And so there's all sorts of things that probably are represented in your library collections, in our exhibitions and our museums that are underrepresented. And so it's a good thing to have librarians and someone involved to think about what stories could be told on Wikipedia that aren't currently. So Wikipedians love librarians. I mean, if you don't know this, I need to say it. And we love you because you already have the skills and the access that Wikipedia treasures. So we need reliable sources and verification and research expertise, information literacy, and you have these things in abundance alongside all of this amazing collections knowledge and subject knowledge. So you're the perfect people for us to engage with. And so we'd like more engagement wherever possible, I think. Now, I've been talking a lot about Wikipedia, so I wanted to make sure to mention that Wikipedia, of course, is just one of a family of wiki projects. We use Wikimedia Commons for images and videos, and Wikisource for transcribing out of copyright books, which can be made available. You can find all sorts of things in Overdrive to borrow in a library system that have come from Wikisource. Wikidata is structured linked metadata. I love it. It's great for finding out what knowledge might exist about certain topics. And there are some other probably slightly less relevant projects like Wikiversity and Wiktionary and Wikibooks. So if you wanted to extend the reach of a library collection, you can feed information into any of these wiki projects. It will come back to users through, all those increased accessibility things, and they will be able to follow links back to your collection and items. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead because I'm realizing that I've talked a lot and we're running out of time. I pulled a couple of examples out there. It was hard to find examples because there's so many. But Hague Sheet Music Collection, they took 40 sheets of digitized sheet music, and they just put a little link to those in about 100 relevant Wikipedia articles for composers and for the songs themselves and lyricists and so on. And it drove a huge increase in visits to their site. One of the reasons I pulled out this project is quite old, but that means that none of these visits are from bots, right? This is pre-AI data. And they're also one of the few people that actually published a before and after graph about what the effect was of putting these links on Wikipedia. So that was quite a small contained project with quite a big effect for their collection. This bottom image comes from the Kalili collection. So it's from a Quran, a named Quran, and the Kalili Foundation, which is a big private collection of Islamic art and material, funded a Wikimedian in residence through the UNESCO Memory of the World project. And he wrote a page for this particular Quran. And this image went on the front page of Wikipedia for about 24 hours. And in that time, it had 15 million views. So the reach is amazing. You know, I think about 18,000 people clicked through to read the entire article about this Quran in that time. There are lots of different projects. I've put a link in the slides, the DOI, for an openly licensed book that talks in much more detail about all the different sorts of things libraries have done to connect with Wiki. And some of the things that can be done, you don't have to edit Wikipedia yourself. One useful thing that Pride New Zealand did for us this year was they just surveyed articles that they were interested in that could be improved and identified some that were missing from Wikipedia and should be written. And this is always a really good thing to do once you have an understanding of, you know, what sorts of things are needed to write a Wikipedia article, like, you know, sources in independent and reliable places, then it's great to have that list. It was a good starting place for Wikipedians that wanted to do some work but didn't really know the topic that well. You can also collect sources about your collections. If you have a clippings file, somebody somewhere in your organisation probably collects press mentions of things in your collections. Consider making that available to Wikipedians, because it's a really, you know, it means we can hit the ground running. If you find someone who's interested in writing out your stuff, they haven't got to go and do all that research to start with. You can also get more involved and actually map what you've got against Wikidata or Wikipedia and actually look and see how many links do exist to our collection and what could we improve. And of course, you can contribute metadata and images and digitized material. You could even hold an editathon. It's amazing what Wikipedians will do for a packet of biscuits and maybe a private tour behind the scenes with a curator or something. And of course, you could edit Wikipedia yourself, which is something we'd like to give you the opportunity to try. So we have these sessions in September, 2 sessions called One Lib and One Ref. So this is a program you might have heard about. It's been running since 2016. And the idea is, if lots of librarians do a tiny bit of work adding statements, we can get rid of these citation needed templates. It runs twice a year, normally in January, February, May, June, but we're going to be rebels and run it in September. And the idea is that small contributions add up. So all you're doing is finding somewhere that needs a citation on Wikipedia, finding a source, checking that the source has got the information, adding a reference and publishing. So it can be quite a quick, small, easy job to do. And so we've got these 2 workshops, the 1st and the 8th, so same bat time, same bat place. And there'll be links coming out to you in an email towards the end of this week to sign up for those. It will be practical training. So we'll take you through from account creation to finding places that need work. I'll have some example edits you can make to practice skills if you haven't identified something you'd like to work on. But you're very welcome to find things yourself on Wikipedia that you'd like to improve. And we'll show you how to do that. And because you're contributing as a community, I'll make up a little dashboard and we'll be able to see the combined effect of all your edits, which is always quite nice. And I put some information there. I'm not going to read this out, but just advice about creating an account. If you're coming, it pays to do it ahead of time, because thinking up the name that you want to use can take a few minutes sometimes. But this is in the slides, which are going to be accessible to you. So please have a look. I'm going to stop there because otherwise there's no time at all for questions.
Yeah, Tamsin, we do have a couple of questions already in the chat. So while other people think about their questions, I'll start with this. You've actually touched on both of them, but obviously some that people are interested in digging a bit deeper. So I'll start with Gareth's question, which is, does Wiki survey contributors, editors, does Wiki survey contributors, editors to get demographics on who is adding and editing information to address conscious or unconscious bias in the articles?
Yes, there have been various surveys done. I can't tell you the most recent. We tend to fall back on this quite early one that shows, I think it was 60% of editors were white, male, American, college educated. The reason that it's problematic to get these figures is because so many people are volunteers and anonymous, and they choose not to turn on an email on their account. So the only way to contact them is on Wiki, and if they choose not to click the survey link, that's entirely up to them. So it's very hard to survey wiki editors and know that you've got a representative sample. So you could ask the Wikimedia community in New Zealand at our regular monthly calls, but you're only going to get the ones that turn up, not the ones that don't. We're quite a female biased community in New Zealand, but that's, again, it's the ones that turn up to the meetings. We tend to, I think, seek more support from each other. So we go to these events and not so much the male editors, and there's more of them. So yeah, it's really hard to get numbers. They do survey, they do try, but yeah.
And the other one is from Catherine. It's just picking up as you were mentioning about finding gaps. So Catherine mentions that the Global Citizen Science Project iNaturalist uses Wikipedia to provide info about species, but it seems to her that there are a heap of New Zealand species still not on Wikipedia, and she'd be interested to know the stats on that gap.
Yes, I can't tell you the stats on that gap. I can tell you that there are some very active Wikipedia editors in the New Zealand community working to close that gap, in particular in botany and in insects. So Siobhan Leachman's a very active one who works a lot on moths, and Sean, who's a Te Papa curator, works a lot on insects and spiders. And then there's Heidi Voigt at Te Papa as well, who works a lot on plants. But these are such big areas and there's such big gaps that it's probably not visible to your average user that, yeah, huge progress is being made, but there's so much more to do. Yeah, they have events in Wellington called Species Editathons at Otago, Wilson's Bush, where they get together people and they create new articles and so on. And it's really great to see that round tripping with iNaturalist, that the Wikipedia articles go back, and iNaturalist, you're able to openly license your images so they can be used in Wikipedia. And that makes this lovely little circle that encourages people to share their images openly and encourages people to create Wikipedia articles when they're missing. So I'm pleased that anyone has noticed that there are some missing, but yeah, wouldn't it be great if they all had a page? I've made, I think, 2 species articles myself. It's not my area of expertise. But yeah, if you're interested in doing that, there's definitely a community of editors that will welcome you and help you.
Amy's just popped in an observation. She says the need for sources independent of the subject reminds me of when the author Emily St. John Mandel gave an interview with Slate just so there was a source for her divorce. So I think that's a lovely little antidote there. Thank you for that.
It is. I mean, it's distressing in a way that you would need to do that. But yes, there has to be a source.
I do have a question, but before I ask my question, I'll just throw open to see, is there anybody who has another question? They might, please by all means use the mic if you prefer. Gareth has just
Bridget.
come in. Oh, Bridget.
Oh, Bridget,
excellent.
before that, just put a question about students. Yes. I would very much say start with Wikipedia, but what you want them to be doing is looking at the sources. But they definitely should be starting with Wikipedia, but with a critical eye, because depending on what you're studying. So what I have hand out, I can probably share links to it in the next sessions. I have a handout about how to read Wikipedia critically, looking at the history page, looking at the talk page, thinking about what's missing, how well structured, how recent are the references, things like that. And that's what I encourage students to do. Because if you read it critically, then you're bound to look at the sources and see, are they reliable, are they the right ones, and then explore them a bit more.
Yeah.
So yes, that's how I would suggest they use it. What's Gareth's question?
Actually, Gareth's question's very similar to mine. It's not a good conversation, is it, Gareth, if we can't bring up AI? Because I was wondering whether you were having issues with AI bots, for instance, going in and pretending to be editors, and then Gareth's kind of asked a slightly more broader question. So maybe you'd like to address them both together there.
AI and Wiki, it's a wonderful, yes. So people might have been aware it was in the news at some point. So you used to be able to write content for Wikipedia using AI, and there were no rules against it. it was causing such a problem for new pages that the first thing the English Wikipedia community did was bring in a guideline that said, if you haven't reviewed the content and it's still got like prompts or it's obviously AI written, we will speedily delete the page. And that's because if it's not clear that a human has reviewed it, it could be nonsense and it's too risky to have it up there. That then progressed over a period of time to not being able to expand an article with AI. So lots of editors were using AI to expand it, and they're just not reviewing the output well enough before they post it. And it's really frustrating because I think lots of people acknowledge that it can be useful, but you have to review it. But if people are not in the habit of doing it, then it's damaging. So you're not allowed to use AI to create content, basically, on English Wikipedia. That isn't the same across all language Wikipedias. And I think that there's also, there is an appreciation in the community for what AI can do for us in terms of tools. So when you're Wikipedia editing, there are lots of routine tasks that you have to do, all the things like vandalism detection and so on. And there's definitely room for bots and so on to help. But we see the effect of bots on Wikipedia as well. So it's constantly being scraped. It causes all sorts of problems for server loads and so on. And that can be a frustration as an editor. Not to mention the number of sources that are paywalled or behind a little verification thing now that's frustration. And you know, they're only like that because AI bots are scraping them as well. And they used to be open. So, yeah.
I think it looks like I've just got one more question maybe to throw at you there, just because you've touched a little bit around open licensing, Creative Commons licensing. I very much know what you're referring to there, but not everybody may be familiar with Creative Commons licensing. So one of you just wanted to quickly give the Cliff Notes version of it.
Yes, copyright's one of those things that you may not want to learn about when you learn Wiki, but you kind of have to after a while, as soon as you start wanting to use images. But when you make any contribution to Wikipedia, you are asked at the point that you publish your edit to openly license it. And what that means in practice is that you are giving other people permission. So it recognizes that you have copyright in what you've created, your words, your image, but you're giving other people permissions about how to use it. And of course, there are various different open licenses. And when they're most relevant, like you don't get to choose your license when you publish your words to Wikipedia, it's open or it's not. But on Creative Commons, on the image libraries, you can choose several different open licenses. You can say anyone can do anything with this, or you can say anyone can do anything, but they have to give me attribution. I have to say, you know, this is my photo. That's what I choose for most of mine. But sometimes there's a slightly more restrictive one that says you can do what you like with it, but you have to openly license it if you change it in any way. So you can't sort of take my free content and make something, copyright it and sell it and keep the rights to yourself. Now, the sticking point on open licensing with images on Wikimedia Commons is that you have to allow commercial use of it. That's part of open licensing, and lots of people don't like that. Lots of places digitizing old photos, etc., will put a non-commercial license on, which means it's not usable on Wiki. And that almost makes me sad. You know, I get where people are coming from, but yeah, we can't use it on Wikipedia, and I don't think that's ever going to change. Is that enough? Did I miss anything crucial about open licensing?
Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I think it is just a matter of encouraging people to sign up to the One Ref, One Lib workshops, which, as Tamsin mentioned, are going to be a lot more hands-on. So the purpose of today was really as a primer, so that people understood Wikipedia, to dispel some myths and to encourage active engagement. But if today was about hui, then the next couple are really about the dewey. And I'm really I'm really excited about getting in there, and and so I will be signing up, and I really hope everybody here also signs up and encourage colleagues as well, particularly if you've got people who didn't come today because they know about Wikipedia, but they've never had the opportunity to do something with Wikipedia, then the next two sessions are absolutely for them. So at any rate, I want to tautaku everything you've just said, Tamsin. You're a treasure. I really appreciate you making your time to come here. And now I'll actually hand us back over to Paula to finish our session and send us off to lunch.
Oh, what a wonderful hour together. It's just been fascinating. So much interest, and there will be comms coming from LIANZA towards the end of the week. And follow us on Instagram. Our new comms lead is posting most of our events on Instagram. They'll also be in Korero, but it's just the worry about having those two things overlap. So thank you, Tamsin. You are a treasure. We're really lucky to have, as a sector, we're lucky to have you, and I bet Otago is delighted as well. Thank you, Siobhan, for you initiating this and your mahi bringing us all together. So I'm going to pop the words for what I think is a appropriate karakia into the chat, and hopefully we'll see as many of you in the next couple of sessions. Ono here te pō, whiri marama, tomo kia te ao, whatu tangata. Tātai ki ronga, tātai ki raro, tātai ahoro. Humie, tā ki e. Kia ora.